Mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to the third part of our series of webinars on high growth markets for first-time exporters. Sorry for a slight delay. We shall get cracking on now, though. In this webinar, we will be talking about China and the opportunities and challenges it presents as a market. The series is being run in partnership with HSBC and the Overseas Business Network and UKTI. And my name is William Barnes-Graham. I'm the Digital Content Manager at Open to Export. We are a government-supported online community helping small UK businesses get ready to sell overseas. Through our content, our Ask the Experts forum, our brand new Export Action Plan, and our various range of supports and resources. Please visit the site at any time and check all these things out. You can ask questions at any point during the webinar using the question panel on the right-hand side control panel. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can at the end, and any that we can't get to, you can ask on our Ask the Experts forum. We don't typically share slides at the end, but we do record this session, and we will post this on YouTube and on our website as well after the event. So you can find these by going onto our special features and then going on to recent webinars. We have a fantastic panel for you today. Setting the scene will be Adam Tian, the head of the China desk at HSBC. He'll be giving an overview of the market, the opportunities and the challenges of trading in China. Following Adam will be Lisa Bertelsen from the China-Britain Business Council. She will be giving some of her experiences helping UK businesses to start trading in China, and will also be giving tips for new exporters. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Adam to begin today's webinar, and I hope it's useful for you.
Hi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your time to join the webinar today. And thanks for the arrangement by Open to Trade. And first, let me do my self-introduction. My name is Adam Tian, and I'm the head of China desk in HSBC UK. Actually, I just moved from China to the UK last month, so hopefully my presentation could be the most latest update of China, thanks to my still fresh memory. So if we go to the first page, this is about the general figures of the country. And in terms of population, China is the largest one in the world. In terms of the geographical area, it's the third largest one. And the capital city is Beijing, where they are very beautiful, the Forbidden City, Great Wall, and Tiananmen Square. The major language is Mandarin in China, or if we translate it into English, it's 普通话. And this is the official language in China, but China is so big a country that each city will have their own dialect, which is quite different from Mandarin. But don't worry, if you can speak Mandarin, everybody can understand you. And the time zone, there are 8 hours time difference between the UK and China. And if we are having the daylight saving time, it should be 7 hours difference. The currency is very important topic now for the world. Is RMB. If we translate it into English, it means the people's money. People is always the most important thing in the country. For the same reason, the central bank in China is also named the People's Bank of China. Don't mistake it with Bank of China, which is a commercial bank. They are two different banks, and the People's Bank of China is the regulator in China. So if we moving to the right of the PPT, sorry, previous page, please. And to catch up the topic, which is very focused on the international trade, I highlight 5 regions in China which have the largest volume of international trade. The first one is Guangdong. And the second one is Jiangsu, and the third one is Shanghai, and the fourth one is Beijing, then Zhejiang. All of them are located in eastern China. If we go to the next page, it's about economic overview of the country. It's the second largest GDP country in the world, following United States. And also it's the largest, trading nation in the world and largest country receiving FDI, which is foreign direct investment. And in terms of the UK and China international trade, UK for the time being is the second largest country in Europe in terms of trading with China, investing in China, and having investment from China. China has been adopting the opening up reform policy for over 30 years. We have seen more and more previous hurdles or barriers being lifted by the country. And those administrative, approval from local government to not only foreign trade, but also ODI and FDI is no more required. So we see this a very positive change and step taken by the central government in China to continue the opening up policy. But, there are still several key industries where SOE has been taking up the predominant role. But recently, we have seen another very encouraging trend that the central government has been inviting those POEs, which is private-owned enterprises, and FIEs, which means foreign invested enterprises, to invest in those key industries and companies. In China, it's a very hot topic, and we call it Public-Private Partnership Program, or PPP. So for the next page, it's very useful for those companies doing business in China or doing business with Chinese companies. There are many advantages. By all means, there are challenges. I think in terms of the advantage, and the key point is the still competitive labor cost. But we have seen the gap of the labor cost from those advanced countries have been narrowing up. Another very important advantage for the country is the strong consumption and service industries. This is about the new focus of China's economy. Because previously, the country has been very much depending or relying on those export-led GDP growth. Today, the focus has been shifted to be more consumption and service industry driven. I'd just like you to see some figures. The service industries actually has contributed to 58% of GDP growth last year. And for the consumption, it has been outpacing that of GDP growth during the past 5 years. So this is the new focus of China, and we believe the new focus will keep the country with a very sustainable growth in the coming decade and onwards. Infrastructure investment, as per the second point under the advantage, has been always another pillar factor to support China's economy development. And even now, the central government have been continuously rolling out new infrastructure projects for high-speed ways, high-speed railways, metro system, and airports. As for the free trade agreements, China thus far has signed up the free trade agreements with 14 countries and regions, covering a total of 22 countries. For example, the free trade agreement signed with Australia will benefit around 80% of Australia's export to China, making them tax-free. Obviously, the challenge is always very challenging. I think the largest challenge is those, very predominant position of those SOEs in key industries, and but we think the challenge will be largely alleviated or mitigated in the long run, given the PPP on the way. The second challenge, I think, is about the talent, especially in terms of the local management team's experience, language, management skills, as well as their understanding of the corporate culture. So as for the communication problems and cultural difference, as well as, there might be need for patients to build up trust and network and the complex business culture. Such a kind of things, I think, are quite normal issues facing us when doing business in every country. So next, please. There are several industries I just highlighted for your easy reference because I think those industries will benefit from the long run of China's economic development, especially in line with the national development strategy in the third 5-year plan. The first one is automobile. The industry has been developing very fast during the past 2 decades. And currently, the new focus from the central government is very much on those new energy automobiles, such as hybrid and electric cars, where consumers can get a subsidy when they buy the new energy automobiles. The second one is retail. This is as a result of the booming performance of consumption and service industry in China. One particular segment in this industry, I think, is the online retail or e-commerce. We all saw the value story of Alibaba and Jack Ma. I think given the strong momentum of retail business in China, there will be more Jack Ma's coming out of China. As for energy, it's very much related to new energy, green energy, such as the hydropower, wind power, and nuclear. Aerospace, according to the forecast of Airbus, in the coming 20 years, China will need around 5,300 new passenger aircraft and freighters. This is very huge investment. Marine, China has been traditionally the world's largest shipbuilding nation in terms of the overall output and capacity. Besides that, I still want to highlight another 2 industries which will very much benefit the recent promulgated One Belt, One Road strategy of China. One is the engineering machinery, and the other is infrastructure construction. Both industries will have a better chance to benefit the One Belt, One Road. And we know that this One Belt, One Road strategy will be largely financed by the AIIB, or the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, where we have seen 57 founding members, including the UK. Next page, please. So this page is about the long-term forecast of China's economy. I don't want to just repeat the words on the paper, but I want to give you some figures. Generally speaking, we remain quite positive and optimistic about China's long-term development. Let me give you some examples. The first one is about the railway mileage. China has been developing very fast during the past decade in terms of the high-speed railway. But today, the railway mileage of China is still just 50% of that of the United States. In terms of the metro system, around 80% of those Chinese cities with population over 5 million don't have the metro system yet. In terms of international trade, 10 years ago, around 60% of China's export were actually made from raw materials imported from other countries. Today, the percentage has reduced to around 40%, and we also see further potential for it to go further down in the coming decade. So this manifests the huge and untapped potential of China. Next page, please. Yes, last but not least, this is about RMB. Again, I just want to give you some figures. Central government in China has been promoting the RMB internationalization. As an international settlement currency, 3 years ago, RMB ranks just around the 15th, global settlement currency. Today, it is the 4th largest settlement currency in the world. And RMB clearing banks has been appointed in 12 countries. 32 countries' central bank have signed up the currency swap agreement with People's Bank of China. And another milestone for RMB internationalization would be, by this year end, IMF will vote for the inclusion of RMB into the special drawing right currency basket. If it goes live, it will be very important for the country and the currency. I think that's all of my presentation, and I have the greatest honor to hand it over to Liz, and who is quite an expert to China and the China economy. And Liz, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And just a reminder to everyone attending that you can use the question panel on the right-hand side to ask questions for the end. Thank you, Adam. Really great overview. And now over to Liz.
Thank you.
Hi there. Hello, everybody. My name is Lisa Bertelsen. I'm from the China-Britain Business Council. Thank you, Adam, for that great overview. I'm just going to give some thoughts about getting into the China market from the CBBC perspective. I think following on from last week's state visit, there has been a huge amount of positivity in many ways in both directions. And I think China is a market that every company needs to at least consider and explore. I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but I think you need to at least consider it. It's not necessarily the easiest market either, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit about how these things work. So if I go to the next slide, it's a very obvious thing to say it's big. Everybody knows China is big. We've just heard from Adam the size of the market there, the number of people, and the scale of the place. But I think it's actually quite useful to think about the size and think about it in terms of it being continental. If you put a map of China over a map of Europe, you get an area that stretches from Iceland to the Urals and from northern Norway to North Africa. And in many ways, like Europe, where there are many differences, there are differences in China too. So you get geographic, linguistic, cultural, developmental differences in those areas. from the north in Heilongjiang right down to the southwest in Yunnan, from Xinjiang in the west down to Fujian in the east. So there are many differences, and I think that's helpful to think about in China, taking it regionally, taking it as a continent. Each of these provinces is essentially a country. You wouldn't approach Europe as one market, you approach Europe in individual countries, and I think the same for China. So looking at it from a provincial or regional way can give you a pilot area. You can go in, trial it, see how things work, and then, assuming things are successful, use it as a springboard to other parts of China. The other thing I would bring out is that it isn't just, I mean, we did hear Adam was talking about the key areas where there is economic growth, and these are key areas, but there are other parts of China that I think are very important. Yes, Beijing and Guangzhou and Shanghai and these eastern seaboard provinces, but other second-tier cities are very, very interesting. They may not have the development yet of Beijing or Shanghai, but they're very keen, and there's a lot going on there. And they're well worth looking at, not least because competition, both domestic and international, is not as intense. And they're still quite large. I had a group in yesterday, I saw a delegation from Changchun in the northeast of China, Jilin province. You know, it's a city of urban residents, 4 million. It's very strong in automotive, it's strong in high-speed rail train carriages and rail area, but it's also looking at service industry. Cities like that are incredibly interesting, I think, for UK companies looking at that market. So look to the Tier 2, maybe even Tier 3 cities. They're looking at products, investment, services, all these areas. If we go on to the next slide, I'm looking a little bit more then about what China wants there. So I think China is changing very much in the consumer and what the consumer wants. They are, as I've pointed out, they're increasingly affluent and aspirational, and they're increasingly urban as well. China now has over 50% of its population in an urban environment, and it's aiming to have over 60% by 2020. And that does create a whole new middle class of people who are looking at buying products, buying services. It's interesting to note that last year, even though there has been a slowdown in the Chinese economy, China still created a record number of urban jobs. 13 million people moved into urban jobs in China last year. So it's still a growth area despite some slowdown in the China economy. And it's interesting to see what these middle-income consumers are buying. We've actually created a number of reports, both on middle income but also e-commerce, on what these people are buying on the internet. Available from our website, and they're free to download, and our website will come up at the end. But it's worth looking at that because it's interesting to see what they're looking for. Just taking them slightly randomly in the order I've got there, I'll pick out education first of all, a really important area. Clearly the UK has a huge bonus in being a native English language country, but it's not just the education that we can sell to China. Chinese students tend to come with a whole raft of people behind them, families who buy property, who buy services, who set up companies. So it's not just about the education itself, it's about so much more. It's also increasingly about the innovation and technology that we're producing in this country through our education system and working with China in cooperation on that. Areas like financial and professional services, these areas that are increasingly analogous with Chinese requirements. In the past, maybe China has looked at, for example, in Europe, Germany, and looked at its manufacturing, and that has been incredibly powerful with the German consumer. Now it's looking more at services, and that's where the UK is having more synergy with the China market. And it's not just in the high-level financial and professional services area, it's also, if you look further down the line, personal banking, insurance, areas like that. And thinking about insurance, looking at the last point there, medical, healthcare is an incredibly interesting area for UK companies. I think we all know that China has an aging population, and with the one-child policy, you have an inverted triangle, sometimes with one person looking after 6 people. So this is an important area that China is seeking to find solutions for. So anything with aging population and looking after elderly or whatever is an important area. There's also an increasing expectation of what people want from things like healthcare. Whereas in the past, maybe you've just been content with getting medical assistance. Now people want more. There's an expectation. That's true actually generally throughout China and services. Travel is an obvious one. I think we all know that Chinese are traveling throughout the world. I think it's interesting for companies that perhaps aren't necessarily ready for the first step into China, particularly in the consumer sector. Chinese travelers buy things. They buy when they're abroad for a whole host of reasons. But it's actually really interesting that you don't need to be in China to sell to people. You can sell to them abroad, and you can actually build a brand abroad. So it's very well worth thinking about how that works too. And then things like retail, and Adam, you mentioned that as well, and retail being one of the big areas within China, particularly online. You talked about Alibaba, Jack Ma. It's interesting that on Singles Day last year, which is the Chinese version of Cyber Monday or Black Friday, it's 11/11, all the ones, very nice. More than 9.3 billion US dollars went through online sales. I mean, that's just huge and massive. So online is hugely important and increasingly mobile. So it's not just e-commerce, it's m-commerce now. People are buying on their phones when they're sitting on the bus. Very important area to consider. And again, you don't need to sit in China to sell through that medium. And what you mentioned, Adam, you mentioned luxury products. And actually, if I go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about some case studies now. And one of them on the next slide is actually Dartington Crystal, who obviously high-end crystal glassware. They were looking for retail opportunities in China and came to CBBC. CBBC is UK Trade and Investment's delivery partner in China for a number of services, including something called OMIS, O-M-I-S, Overseas Market Introduction Service, which is a framework essentially that provides anything from market intelligence through to more in-depth research, through to partner identification, through to setting up meetings. It can do many things, and it is bespoke to a particular company. So Dartington came and said that they'd like to find out about the glassware market, what was the competition like, and they wanted to find out about potential importers and distributors that they could work with. So we put together a project for them, and that led to 3 visits to China, follow-up visits. I think it's quite important to draw out the fact that there were 3 follow-up visits. It's not something where you necessarily do a project and then you go to China and wham, you've got a distribution agreement. These things can take time in China, and it's worth being patient with China. Nevertheless, they did actually end up meeting useful people and ended up signing an exclusive agency agreement and contracts, and went into a major department store where we continued to help them with staff training and things like that. And we are continuing to work with them on finding out more, finding more distributors and stores. If we go on to the next slide, another case study. This one actually is about, in many ways, food security and what Chinese parents particularly want for their families. They want to know that what they're feeding their children is safe and actually contains what it says the food contains what it says it contains. So another area of huge potential. Working with a Chinese company that imports foods, CBBC created this thing called a business opportunity. Again, this is something we run in partnership with UK Trade and Investment. We gather together throughout our offices in China business opportunities, which we then put out through online platforms and through mailings. And through this, the littlepast Organics noticed an advert, if you want to call it that, a business opportunity advert from LLC saying that they were looking for baby products or food products for China. They went through an assessment process and then actually met up and made the connection, and littlepast Organics are now shipping their product into China. I should mention that things like food and beverages actually are not the easiest thing to ship into China. Clearly there are considerable rules and regulations around this, and that's true of other areas in China too, of other sectors, and that's where CBBC, we have specialists in this sector, we have specialists in a range of sectors who can actually help and support companies wanting to go in the market, not just through OMIS and BizOps, but also through support and assistance that we can give regionally. If we go on to the next slide, it's just a little bit about CBBC and what we can do. Mention there again that we are an independent advisory organisation, but we work with UK Trade and Investment. And as you can see, we've been doing China business for many, many years. And I think the key thing I'm going to pull out there is the number of offices we have. Yes, we have 10 in the UK, but actually, more importantly, I always feel, we have 13 offices in China. And bringing myself back to my slide about being big and about being regional, we actually have people in local offices in many of the regions in China. They know their local market. They are Chinese. They know what's required. So we can help companies into the market through those local offices. I'll just finish off by highlighting the website there at the bottom. There is a lot of information on our website. There are reports, and there's a lot of help on there. So I would just say, if you are interested in China, do come and talk to us. We are all China specialists. We love talking about China. We'll talk to absolutely anybody about China. So do come and have a chat with us, and we'll see what we can do to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That was a really good insight, and really good to see some of those case studies as well. Really gives a kind of on the ground kind of feeling to it as well. So we're just going to open up the Q&A now. Just a reminder, we haven't had too many in so far, so please send in your questions through the control panel on the right-hand side. The first question we have is one from John. He asks about kind of producing videos for websites, and he asks, should a voiceover be available in Mandarin and Cantonese, or will Mandarin be enough? And he also asks, where can videos be hosted within China? So he believes YouTube is not available, and asks if that's the case. I don't know if Lisa, you want to start on that?
I can do. The language issue is about where you're actually selling into. As Adam pointed out, Mandarin is the language that is understood throughout China. It's spoken throughout China, Putonghua. So I would automatically say have Mandarin as your voiceover. If you know you're specifically selling in the Guangdong area or into Hong Kong, then consider also having Cantonese, but I would say Mandarin. On the issue of YouTube, no, there isn't. There's Youku in China. There's another version. So it's talking to people who are knowledgeable in that area. There are a number of China social media experts who can help on that. So it's worth talking to them.
Thank you, Lisa.
Just one more point. Just one more point to add, because actually previously the local language and the dialect in some areas of China, such as Guangdong and Hong Kong, has been the whole other language than Putonghua. So, but the recent momentum shows that more and more people there can catch the Mandarin, and it's just a very good communication. And I think Mandarin will be the only language and official language that could be understood by almost all Chinese people. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. We've had a really interesting couple of questions actually on the same topic. This is to do with IP. One person asked, what improvements have been made in regard to copyright and patent protection? And he notes how there have been many examples of copying. How can British companies successfully protect their IP? I don't know who wants to start on that.
I'm happy to go in there to start with anyway. It is true. I mean, copying happens. To be fair, copying happens throughout the world, and I know China has a reputation for it, but it does happen elsewhere. China does actually have very good laws, both on copyright and patents and IP protection generally, trademarking. It has been an issue in the past to get judgments for foreign companies, but that is changing a lot. And it is much, much easier now that the Chinese judiciary who look at the IP side of things are professionals, and they look at it from a professional point of view. It's also interesting to note that Chinese companies have themselves been ripped off in the past, both in China and abroad, and they don't like it. So they're pushing a lot of the regulatory changes that are happening within intellectual property. One of the key things I would say is in areas like trademarking and patents, it is possible to protect yourself. So get your trademark sorted in China. China operates on a first-to-file system, so you have to get your trademark registered before anybody else does. And it's worth looking at that very carefully, because if you don't own your trademark, you can't then sell into China. So look at your trademark. There's a lot of help available. Again, there's help on our website on that. Again, with patents as well, China has a number of different, it's got 2 different versions of registering patents, including utility patents, which can be a helpful way of speeding up processes there as well. So there is help available, and it's worth protecting yourself, because if you don't protect yourself, then you can't actually have any comeback. The other thing to think about is when, if you've got a product that gets ripped off, I mean, it's also worth thinking about how much you create in one particular factory, for example. If it's a product, are you putting all your eggs in one basket? What about keeping some very high-tech intellectual property either in another place outside China, in another area? There are ways of mitigating risk in IP issues in China. So it's a very short answer to actually a very big question, but there are ways of mitigating the risk.
Thank you, Lisa. This is a question probably for Adam. And just about kind of the reverse, kind of companies trading into the UK from China, and I guess it's kind of a question maybe asked in relation to kind of supply chains as well. But just wondering, what's the kind of the landscape for companies from China to UK kind of trade? So yeah, so kind of just to clarify, the question is companies trading from China with the UK. What's happening with that kind of what opportunities are there for Chinese companies trading to the UK?
Yes. Sorry for that. There have been more and more, Chinese companies. They are moving their trading and activities from China to the UK, and I think one more key motive for them to do so is, they want to learn more from the developed countries, such as the UK. And another, I think, very important the motive for those Chinese companies is that they want to follow the most standard international rules to play with in the global market. From the HSBC's perspective, we have been, ruling out the corridor trade, supporting all those, the cross-country trading activities, and also there have been many companies, they are considering some, capital market or debt market activities in overseas, such as London, and this is exactly the focus of the bank to support going forward. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. This is a question for Lisa. And if you had a few questions about it, it's basically about business culture. And the question is, what recommendations do you have for face-to-face visits in China? Best practices, gift taking and giving. What are the do's and don'ts of that kind of interrelational aspect?
Well, I always think, be yourself in a sense, and just imagine that if you're not doing anything that you think is rude, then that works fine. China is obviously a different cultural market, and I think Adam alluded to that. On the gift-giving side, it's very normal to give a first meeting gift, if you like. That's something that goes back millennia in China. So it's fine to give small gifts, keep it quite small, keep it quite general, something that's very British, something that will remind people of you in a sense. It's something that you can leave with them. I think when you're going into a meeting in China, some of the things I would highlight is, one, to have have something in Chinese. It can be a one-pager. It doesn't need to be your entire product range translated into Chinese. If you can have one page about who you are and what you are, piece of A4 translated into Chinese, to be able to hand that over is incredibly useful. The other thing I would say is getting your name cards translated, get your name translated into Chinese, your title, something you can give over, and it actually gives people a sporting chance of being able to pronounce your name apart from anything else. And again, is a leave behind for people. face-to-face is always, I think, hugely important in any situation, and I think being able to go to China and meet people face-to-face is massively important. It just helps create that bond, that trust that you need when you're doing business with people.
And from my perspective, I think it's also important to have the KYC, the know your counterpart, and it's very important for your partners to know your business and know your value. So I have seen several, successful stories for the UK-China joint venture when they start up their cooperation. And it's very important for our UK partners to invite those Chinese companies to pay a visit to your operation here in the local market. This is something very tangible and useful, and for sake of their immediate and the better understanding of your business and your value. So this is a two-way communication, and you should also consider the other way around. Thank you.
Can I just mention one more thing, actually, just thinking about it as well, kind of alludes to that as well, and get a good interpreter, by the way. It's massively important. You are only as good as your interpreter, essentially, and if you don't have a good one, you can waste an entire trip to China. So that's my soapbox thing, is always get a good interpreter. And they can also help read a meeting, not just the words that are being spoken, but all the language that's going on around that that's nonverbal.
Thank you both. We're starting on a little bit tight on time, but I'll ask one more question, I think. And this is again probably for Lisa to start off with, at least. And it is, where can an exporter find out the costs associated with importing food products into China, and I guess maybe products in general, kind of different types of products as well?
So products to China.
Yeah.
Yeah, tariffs. Well, there are actually websites that are very helpful that will give you the tariffs for China. It's always, I mean, I would always say a good starting point is actually getting a good distributor or agent who can help you with these things. But pre that, if you like, there are websites that can give you the tariffs, the VAT, and things like that. I'm happy if somebody has a specific question on this, I can happily speak to them at a later date. I'd be happy to email them about these things.
Cool. Thank you both. And I think, yeah, as I was saying, we're running low on time now, so I think we'll probably stop the question and answer there. And yeah, you can ask any questions which may have been unanswered. Please don't hesitate to ask them on our forum, the Ask the Experts forum, which you can find on the Open to Export website. Generally, our speakers or our community of experts will answer these questions within a day or two. Thank you to both of our speakers. Two really great presentations, I thought, really getting both of the overview and also some of the underground experience as well. And also thank you to both HSBC and the Overseas Business Network for helping us with the series. We'll be sending you a recording of this webinar following it, and you'll be able to access it by going onto our website with all the rest of our recent webinars by going to the Special Features tab, then clicking Recent Webinars. And there you will already see our Germany webinar from yesterday, and our USA webinar will be there shortly. A reminder that the series actually concludes pretty promptly after this one at 3:30. We'll be talking about India to finish off with. And following the High Growth Markets series, we will be doing our next webinar at the end of next month, and it will be on how to reach international customers online. This week we launched a brand new part of our our service. It's the new Export Action Plan. It's an online planning tool to help new exporters get ready to sell overseas. Please take a look at the website for more information. We're very excited about it, and please try to complete your own and submit it to our competition for a chance to win £3,000 of funding. Definitely a very exciting thing we're doing this winter. So yeah, that's all from us today. Well, apart from India. So please take our survey as you exit to let us know what you thought of this webinar. Give us any thoughts about future webinars, and yeah, any help and comments are appreciated as always. So thank you for attending, and hopefully see you soon.